And there it is. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle. And it is the 29th of July, 2021. I didn't think that 29th of July, 2021 would look quite like this. I had higher hopes, but nevertheless, here we are. Let me just now, and now, uh, uh, Now, most of you probably think I had like a remote controller I was doing with my mouse, but I was actually making extremely small movements with my body. That's what gave it that digital look. So anyway, I hope everyone's doing well. Going to do an entertainment show tonight because I feel like it. I had a lot of fun talking about that, and that's certainly where my mind is, or where my head is, as we used to say back when I was in college and high school. Man, that's where's your head at, man? My head's in show business right now. So since that's where my head is at, man, that's what we're gonna do. I last week I showed some animation before the show. I did not do this time. Those of you watching who must have had enormous levels of frustration have no fear. However, I did finish the script for this animation. It's 37 pages. It's about it's probably 3 times longer than what I originally planned on. However, it's just the title page says D is for Dungeon, and then below that it says written by Bill Whittle and William Shakespeare. 20% of that script, at least that much, is him directly, and we got the whole thing done. So just give you an idea what's next. I will let you know sort of the plan, and then we will move on and take some entertainment type directions. So I did a little back of the envelope calculations and realized that given how much animation I've been able to do by myself so far, if we were to continue on at this rate, then I think it's pretty reasonable to say that we could have the finished animation done by end of August 2028. So the big question has always been, how do I farm some of this out? How do I hand it off? Since I'm the writer and the director, and since all of this stuff is digital, and it kind of means I'd always thought I would go last, that I would like have other people getting things ready, like lighting and all the rest of it, then they'd hand it to me. But no, what I found was I have to be there. There, this is so weird. It's like I have to be there where the camera is in the forest that doesn't exist. But I have to be there and set up the shots and set up the animations. So as it turns out, I actually need to be the first person on a scene and not one of the last ones. But there is a way to get other people working on this, and the problem was I didn't know how to do it. I knew that there were things like the camera position and the position of the characters and timing of the dialogue and all that stuff that I did not want to hand out, because that's the essence of it. So I had a talk with Jeff, our friend from Battlestar Galactica. I've still not asked him if it's okay to use his last name, but in any event, a guy with a lot of experience in this kind of thing. And I talked also with a guy who was 30 years in the game industry, and he said, speaking as an illustrator, sketch the whole thing out. I might have mentioned this last week. Don't start details in the corner, because you're going to run out of time. You're going to have a quarter of your total panel is going to be incredibly well detailed. Everything was going to be just garbage. Just sketch the whole thing and then just iterate. So that's great, but how do I iterate? Well, we talked about it, and this is the workflow that we're going to do. Script is finished. It's locked and finished. It's really fun. And somewhere in the next several days, if it's not done by next Thursday, I'll be very, very disappointed. We're going to sit down. We're going to do an audio recording of basically the final audio. And Zoe and I will have printed scripts, and we'll be able to read into the microphone. We'll perform it into the microphone as if it's a radio show, or as if it's voiceover for an animated movie, like you've probably seen behind the scenes on all the Pixar stuff. Just imagine that, as if it was a real thing. So we'll get the we'll get a high quality audio version performance of the vocals, and then we'll cut that together, and then essentially we will have a radio play. And if you just ran that, you would probably find that, in terms of telling the story, virtually all of it is there. So once I get that done, then I'll have it timed out. It'll just be audio, but I'll have time. I can adjust the timing on the dialogue. I can do all these things, get it pretty close. And then from there, I can start laying animation over the existing dialogue. And I don't have to waste time with doing things like the facial motion capture just yet. So I can have just a character where we want him to be and just have him turn and look at the thing and just hack through it and kind of take it from there. Now, one of the things that I spent some months on this last 2-3 minutes, and it's just not going to happen at that rate. One of the things I realized was that on the animation that I've shown before, most of those shots, I think I did 14 camera angles so far on that forest. I think I have 14 cameras in that forest and probably another 5 to go, something like that. I realized that, okay, every single one of these 14 shots I have rendered no less than 10 times and probably more like 30. A little problem here, I'll fix it again, brighten it up a little bit here, worry about that. This is exactly what this guy warned me against. And since it's the entertainment show tonight, I realized I should have known better, because when people ask me, how do you finish a screenplay? I say, you start writing it and you never, ever, ever go backwards. And somebody, by the way, parenthetically said, can we record the table read for members only? Yes, we are going to record all of this for members only. And we're going to get members involved with this all the way through. So believe me, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to record the entire thing. It's going to be an absolute blast. Absolute blast. Anyway, so I've got this whole thing laid out now in the future, hopefully in a few days. And then I just dropping the animations in. But I realized, as I was saying, that I would do some of these shots 30 times. And now I realize that has wasted hundreds of hours of my time. So one of the first things I plan to do is I'm just going to go through it. I'm going to set it up. I'm going to block out the existing animation using, store-bought animation sets. And then I'm going to set up the camera angles and do what I did before, and then I'm going to just move on to the next shot. Because now I've got the thing set up, I've got it blocked the way I want it, I've got the camera doing the way I want it, I got the characters where I want it, but there's lots and lots of sniggly little things, a little jump between two different animations. And a great example is on like the last shot that I rendered, there's a pre-made animation of a taunt where the guy with the hammer just starts banging against a shield, tunk, 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 like this. And since all the characters are slightly different, I was looking at this and the hammer's going right through the shield because it's digital. And I realized this is what I need to do here, because I could spend 3 hours fixing that, just that. So I'm checking through online job postings, and I need a relatively inexperienced and an inexpensive animator to go through and clean these things up. Just clean up the motions, and that's something I don't have to touch again. Once we have those motions cleaned up, then we can take each one of these individual environments. It starts off in a forest, then it goes to the exterior of the castle, then there's the castle gate, then there's downstairs, then there's a treasure room, and there's a room where the football orcs are, and all of this other stuff. And once I've got all of the shots in for the forest, let's say, that I could take that entire forest sequence out and hand it to somebody to do the sound design, real sound design. So instead of just me munching in a couple of shots, they do the footprints, the sound of the feet walking through the mud, and the crickets and torches doing that. And the closer you get to the torch on a shot, the louder it gets. So somebody does sound design, makes so much of an incredible difference in terms of bringing this stuff to life. That's going on. Meanwhile, I'm still moving downstream. I'm writing, putting new shots together and handing them off. And then next to the last thing that we would do, the penultimate experience would be this. We've got, in the script, I've got 2 major combat pieces. Most of the time we don't fight anybody. We just confront them and they run away. And that actually was kind of disappointing because you got swords and shields, you kind of want to use them. So the climax of the story is when we just take on all of these hell spawn from inside the Democratic Party national headquarters, and just wave after wave after wave of these creatures coming at us. But there is one. There's like a boss creature that Zoe gets, and there's like a boss creature that I get, and he gets the race baiter. He purposely says this one's mine. And the race baiter is this gigantic snake with a guy's body on it. And he looks a little bit like Al Sharpton with long claws and stuff. And he's got to have a real fight with him. It's got to be really good animated combat, which I just don't know how to do and can't do, and would take me a year to do badly. I, on the other hand, my boss battle is with the Oathbreaker, which is a gigantic, enormous, hulking kind of a golem kind of a thing. And that's basically your James Comeys and all your other people in the intelligence community and so on who swore to protect the country and ended up doing their best to let the politicians take it over. So that's my personal battle thing. And I've got a long battle with him too. So what I will do, and I've already found some candidates, is in those particular cases, I will take those two battle sequences and I will farm those out to high-end animators who do nothing but battle animations. And those will probably cost several $1,000s each battle. But that's honestly the only stuff in there that's really, terribly expensive. It's prohibitive to do the whole thing that way, certainly. But in any event, that way we can have two really, really excellent set pieces. The rest of the stuff is us mostly just hacking and stabbing at things. And so it does resemble Romney, actually. And the Oathbreaker. And Comey. It's Comey. I'm really going after Comey. So then we're in business. We've got a couple of evil voices. I'm going to sound those out. There's not a lot of a couple people have said, and a couple of people keep writing me saying, hey, is there anything we can do with the animation? This one has no minor roles. It's me and Zoe, and everything else is a grunting orc, with the exception of the voice of the dungeon, which has got to be video game evil, And then I also have, I'm also looking into seeing whether I can find anybody who can do a good enough voice impersonation of Pelosi. I can get by with just using recordings of her and Biden, but it would be better if I had somebody who could. But it has to be nails on thing. So anyway, that's what happens, and then all the pieces come together and we polish them up, and then we're going to spring for a custom soundtrack, because you can do a lot with stock music. But for example, on the animation I've already done, the werewolf comes out and the guys are holding the torch, and the werewolf comes out, and then there's this big crash dolly push in. And the werewolf goes from being, in the middle of the forest to just to zoom up to this guy's head and face against the moon. And that kind of thing requires a music cue that's written for it. So we're going to spend a little money on this to try to get it done right. But I have to tell you, this one, I think this one is going to really make a difference, because this, I showed it to a couple people and they said, this is ideological warfare. This is what they've been using against us for half a century now. I said, yes, it is. Yes, it is. So I am going to do something I have not really ever done in my entire career, and that is I am going to get out there and pimp this thing hard. I expect I'm going to be back on Fox with this thing. I think it's going to be big. When I say me, I mean hopefully Zoe and I together. It'll be fun to see a little clip of the animation and then see the two of us sitting side by side. But anyway, that's about it. So we're getting ready to do to ship this thing into second gear anyway, at least, and we'll start seeing some real progress. And once we start to develop these pipelines, things will go a lot faster. Anyway, and just parenthetically, Dwayne Cates says he's flying along easy in the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 and loving it. With my health and finances, it's close as I'll get to it. It's really fun. It is really fun. It's a fun little airplane. Try a couple of patterns with a 70-degree bank, Dwayne. It's epic. So anyway, I'm very, very, very excited about this, and I really am. It's always hard to say these things. Uh, I am blown away by the script, and I'm blown away by it because of how, just because of the feel. So I said 20% of this was Shakespeare, and I wasn't kidding. I started writing the script using the Shakespeare insult generator, which basically takes a random adjective plus a second random adjective, attaches it to a random noun, and creates a Shakespearean. You put a thou in front of it and creates a Shakespearean insult. And I was just tickled to death with this, and I was just running them, and I was just pouring them in there. It was great. And somewhere around a week or so ago, I I got a hold of a list of actual insults from the actual plays. So these aren't just words, these are at least a sentence, and in some cases, an entire set of lines. And I took a quick snapshot of every one of them. I had about 45, 50 of them. And then I would go through and I would try to see which villain this particular insult fit. So if I've got somebody, relatively lightweight, I just throw a fairly lightweight insult at them. But for the Oathbreakers, this is the only moment in that there's about a minute and a half in this kind of Dark Night of the Soul thing, where it's deadly serious, where it's just plain straight, completely straight serious. And this is what I say to the Oathbreaker. We have this epic battle, and I'm basically talking to James Comey here, and I think that much will be pretty clear. So after we're circling around each other, we both got our swords and shields up, and this is a direct quote from a number of different Shakespeare plays, but just to give you a flavor of it. Um, Here's what Bill Shakespeare had to say about guys like James Comey. Such inordinate and low desires, such poor, such bare, such lewd, such mean attempts, such barren pleasures, rude society that thou art matched withal and grafted to. Thou art in the worst rank of manhood. I throw thy name against the bruising stones. Drop into the rotten mouth of hell, thou traitor. Raise thy tool, my naked weapon is out. All right, then, by God. And when I'm a little more familiar with the lines, it'll sound even better. So, yeah, and and so that was like one of the harder ones, and then I saved one for Biden. As we're leaving Biden's room, I just kind of go saucily in front of them, because they're just fossilized idiots. And my parting words to Biden, who's this gigantic Egyptian kind of fossilized mummy. Where is it? It's right here. So as I'm kind of leaving, kind of in a saucy fashion, I say, "Well, Lord Impostor, thou art so leaky that we must leave you to thy sinking. Hence, horrible villain, or I'll spurn thine eyes like balls before me. I'll unhair thy head. Thou hast been stewed in brine, thou hast been stewed in brine, thou doddering, flea-witted old pickle. Thou speakest an infinite deal of nothing." It's epic, 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 epic. Thou art so leaky that we will leave you to thy sinking. I just absolutely love it. So anyway, that's that. And that'll do it for this. Unhair his legs, exactly right. Well said, Mr. Ruppert. So it's going to be great. And the, okay, I shouldn't do this. I'll just do one more. This is when we first see Pelosi, who's this floating wraith with a bloodstained gown, and instead of a string of pearls, I'm going to use little teeth, and she just floats there. She's got a mask on. She's got a zombie head that I'm going to use dead zombie eyes. And when we first see her, hang on. Yeah, when we first see her, Here we go. I say, her horrid image doth unfix my hair. Her horrid image doth unfix my hair. Hath this droning clay-brained canker blossom a name? Yes, she's the last of the Pelosii, 8 sisters. 8 sisters, each weaving their own thread of deception and temptation. One was master of greed, one of despair, one of sloth, and one of malice. The 5th spun threads of treason, the 6th of lies, and the 7th of lust for power. All have since repaired to hell from whence they came, save for this 8th of the Pelosii, the last. And which thread does this one spin? All of them, brother. She's the master of all of them. So, I'm going to go ahead and read it, and I think it will be a lot better than the stuff I slugged in there before. It'll be a lot easier for me when I've got the headphones on and a microphone, because then I can, let the voice drop, and I think I'll be able to get. I know I'll be able to get at least what I got on the America's Forgotten Heroes and the Cold War and that kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to it. So we should have a finish. I'd like to have this thing recorded by next Thursday. I'd like to have it recorded by Monday, to be honest with you. And then we'll edit together like highlights of the probably highlights of the recording session, and then we'll make it available for members only, and we'll just keep you guys involved. Anyway, that was lengthy but fun as usual. So now let's go ahead and take some entertainment questions from the Book of Faces, which I know everybody wants to get off of, and so do I. But like I said, this is kind of how the show started back before they admitted they were evil. Anyway, so we'll do that again, and then we will do a members only one next time. I promise. I've been trying to get that done. Oh, some nice comments on the Fauci one. Yeah, that Fauci moving back to America was the nerve of that. Twerp. Boy, I got to do something about that lighting. I look like I've been cooked on a broiler medium rare. And for those of you who have seen the firewall, the moving back to America with Fauci, we did 3 like cult songs from people worshiping him, and this first one is from a guy named Randy Rainbow, and I'm here to tell you, that is the creepiest dude I think I've ever seen. Anyway, here we go. So let's see what we get. And we'll start off with Martin Archer, top fan. Got 2, so I'll take the first one. I don't think I've ever heard you talk about old movies from the classic period, the 40s and the 50s. That to me is the best period in movie history, with perennial classics such as The Best Years of Our Lives, From Here to Eternity, The Bad and the Beautiful, and countless more. The storytelling was so much better than the vast majority of movies made today. I'm also a big fan of film noir and wondered if you have any favorites. It's funny, it's a really good question, Martin. That particular period is not one that I'm terribly familiar with. In fact, I would have to say that's probably the only period in American movie history that I really would just say is like a major dark spot for me. Now, I'm not putting words in your mouth under any circumstances, because some of these films obviously are classic. But there's something about Martin, I'm not saying this is what you said. I'm just saying this is my prejudice of it, is that this whole kind of Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and Oklahoma and Paint Your Wagon and Doris Day. Doris Day to me is just it. Now I know she's a little later. Now noir, on the other hand, film noir is absolutely brilliant. Noir is fantastic. We studied noir when I was in at the University of Florida. We didn't have a film department, so we studied film in the English department. And we saw a lot of classic movies, a lot of really. I mean, I've seen the movies that everybody who ever wants to get into filmmaking should see, and I'm talking about things like The Bicycle Thief, Andalusian Dog, Seventh Seal, all this other stuff, and obviously the first of the really kind of noir classics, Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, that sort of thing. But first really noir film I could think of was M, which is a film with Peter Lorre, young Peter Lorre, who's basically it's a German film. So it's not exactly Disney. And M is the story of a child murderer. And I'm not saying it's the academic first one, but it's the first one I remember that used these super high contrast. Everything was pretty much in black and white then, obviously, but in the case of M, he was doing things that you cannot do with the human eye, and we've talked about that before. A great example of the kind of things that I'm talking about when I say there, when you want to get people to think you're making a movie and you want to bring them into the world, then you have to use the imperfections of the human eye and the human mind on screen in order to get people to believe this stuff. And the classic example of that is that our eyes are not capable of universal focus. So we just have focus on the foreground, background's out of focus. Quickest way to make a film look like an amateur film is to have just universal flat focus across the frame. Your eyes don't work that way. So these are the kind of things that we do to make film look like vision. We have to degrade the capabilities of it. Cameras, even the first film cameras, could record a much wider field of view, tack sharp across the entire focal plane. And nobody sees that way. So there's a lot of things we can do to do that, but there are a couple things that the camera can do that the human eye cannot do, but the human mind does. And the great example of this is the camera. And in film noir, when you crank up the contrast, the camera can take a part of a room to bottom black as it gets. And so you can walk into let's say you're walking down in M, a lot of it takes place on the streets of Berlin, I guess. And so there are these dark shadows, and you can't see anything in the shadows. It's just a black diagonal bar. Well, your eye doesn't work that way. If you walk down a street, you've never ever been able to walk down a street and be able to see where you're going and then have some part of this place be impenetrably dark. Your eyes just adjust and constantly opening up and closing the iris. But on film, you can intentionally underexpose areas that give you something that your eye will never see, but that your mind sees all the time, and that is, I don't know what's in that shadow. I don't know what's there. It's a physicalization of an emotional state. Because the camera can do what the camera can do, we can make a shadow or a doorway in a room. How many jump scares have there been in horror films where something comes out of the darkness, right? Or a guy's down there with a flashlight in his basement. And he's shining the light all over the place, and all of a sudden he turns and he sees this thing come at him. It doesn't work that way. You go down into a basement, turn on the flashlight, lights up the whole room. Yes, that one part's a little bit brighter, but our perception only looks at that small area. So that's what it's able to do, and that's what film noir really is. Its French term means film black, basically. And once you understand the power of it, then you can write for and light and direct movies for noir, and you get something that's not reality. It's just kind of cooler. So you start to get into the Dashiell Hammett stuff, and all this other stuff, and then you get this kind of language of this particular genre. Noir's a genre. And you get the language, it's the tough alcoholic detective who's got a tiny office with his name on the glass door, and he's there at 11:30 at night, and he's got a typewriter and his 38 revolvers on the desk, and he's got a glass of scotch, and he hasn't shaved. All of it, it's a language, and we get it, and we like that world very much. So the dark stuff I really like, and there are some great movies from that time. I remember The Rose, because you said Here to Eternity. And Burt Lancaster was an actual actor. But I'm not really familiar with it, because when I think about that period, to be honest with you, Martin, I tend to think of it, at least in the late 50s, early 60s, as being the opposite of noir. Just cartoon lit, like I said, Oklahoma and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers and all the rest of this kind of pablum. Now, if we want to talk about the 40s, then you're starting to get into things like, Citizen Kane. I think was it 39? I just have to talk about Citizen Kane for a minute. Any list of the greatest movies ever, I think I've maybe seen two exceptions out of hundreds, will always list the greatest movie ever made as Citizen Kane. And it is. I don't think there's any question about it. It is the best movie ever made. It's not the most movie ever made. I think the most movie ever made is Raiders of the Lost Ark, but Citizen Kane's the best film ever made. And there's a number of reasons for this. One of them is the script. It's got this kind of Rashomon idea of we're going to tell the same story, but we're going to look at it through different people's perspectives, and it's going to have a different feel on it and all the rest of it. But the reason it's the greatest movie ever made is because of a guy named Orson Welles. And it's a shame on some level that I had to experience Orson Welles backwards. In other words, I saw 400-pound Orson Welles talking about they will sell no wine before it's time 15 years before I saw Citizen Kane. So, yeah, it's better than The Godfather. The Godfather's a close second, but Citizen Kane is the best movie ever for reasons, I think. And there's so much of The Godfather that comes from Citizen Kane. Just that's all there is to it. Paul Masson wines. It was all no wine before its time. And you could tell he was just roaring drunk. And this was Orson Welles, this giant, fat, bearded guy. And then you go back in time and you see Citizen Kane. And as you start to learn about this, you realize that Citizen Kane was his first film. I forget how old he was. I want to say he was 24 or something like that when he does. He's incredibly young. And he's coming off of the Mercury Radio Theater. So all of the people in that movie are actors that he's worked with for 4 or 5 years before, 26, 4 or 5 years before. And he knows them and he knows what they can do. And he didn't write the script, but he knows who's going to belong in those roles. And Joseph Cotten, just as one example of the entire cast, is brilliant. It's just brilliant. Okay, Martin, Citizen Kane is crap. Well, then I guess I'm wasting my time. So anyway, to continue talking about this crap movie, he had really solid actors that he'd worked with before, but he was absolutely obsessed with detail, and he invented a fair amount of the language of film in making Citizen Kane. The person who really invented the language of film was D.W. Griffith, who was a famous racist who made Birth of a Nation. He invented the close-up, the cutaway, the reversal. He just invented it. Everything prior to that was just put actors on stage and turn on the camera and film them on stage. In fact, in the early days of movies, there was real concern that among theater owners and the distributors, that if you didn't show the whole actor in every shot, that people would want their money back. Not making that up. They were really concerned that if you just showed a close-up of somebody, then would they still be willing to pay full fare? Anyway, so D.W. Griffith invents all of this stuff. D.W. Griffith invents the language of film, the wide shot, the close-ups, reversals, all of this. Sergei Eisenstein invents the power of the cut, the edit. This is 20 years after Griffith, somewhere around there. The Soviet film school, the Soviet film industry can't afford film because they're communists. And so in order to keep them busy, what Eisenstein would do is he would take Western films and just recut them. He'd just re-edit them. And there's a classic example of this where he would show a person with a completely neutral expression, just a face staring into the camera. And then he'd cut to a shot of like delicious dinner. And then he'd show a shot of like a woman staring into the camera, and you should see a shot of like a baby in danger and stuff. And he would basically be saying, what emotions are they portraying? And you would say, well, this guy's hungry and this woman is fearful for her child. Nope. You edit them against other pictures and people's perception of their expression changes. It's the cut. It's the cut that made that switch in your mind go. So that kind of genius is there. But Orson Welles came in and did things that have never been done before. For example, he's the first person I think that I'm aware of where you can see the ceilings in his shots. Everything you've ever seen prior to Citizen Kane shot on the set, a movie stage. And you can't look at the ceiling on the movie stage because that's where the lights are. So he's got a problem. He's got a situation where in the beginning of Kane's life, Kane is a colossus. He's a publishing magnate. He's a millionaire. He's powerful. He's hugely dynamic. And so Wells understands, because he's a genius, that he has to show him towering. And the only way he can show Kane as a towering figure is to put the camera down low and film up at him, which means now that he's got to have the ceiling of like the newsroom when he's a newspaper editor. And now the question is, how do you light this stuff? The cameras and the lenses were so slow and the film stocks were so slow. They had to, I've walked onto a movie set when I got here in 88. So I think I was on the movie set in 89 or 90. It's changed since then. But when I went in there and walked onto a lit movie set, Hollywood movie, even then, there must have been 20,000 watts of electricity going through, and no less than that at all. These huge banks of 900 watt lights each, just so much heat and so much light in order to narrow down that iris so they can get the depth of field that they want. So he has to solve all of these problems, and then he tells stories in shots that don't even need any explanation. You know, the husband and wife are at a table, and every time we come back to them, they're at a bigger table. They're just further apart. When he gets into the seedy side with his mistress and stuff, it becomes a completely different movie. Just comes completely noir. But all of that to say, it's an incredible script, and best of all, the whole thing is satire. It's not just a story. He's got an axe to grind, and the axe he's grinding is Hearst rather, is William Hearst. Charles Foster Kane is William Randolph Hearst, and Xanadu is whatever Hearst Castle is. So he's sticking a guy without really being able to stick him, and as Shelby points out, he really pissed off Hearst. He certainly did. Hearst tried to ban the movie and all the rest of it. Didn't get great reviews at the time and so on. San Simeon, thank you. So he's taken a shot at somebody who he perceives to be corrupt by making a film about a guy who becomes corrupt. Doesn't start out that way. And I just think it's just perfectly structured and breaks so many rules that I just think, I was blown away when I saw it, and I'm blown away every time I do see it. And I'm especially blown away by the fact that this guy was 26 years old. That's the real miracle to me of Citizen Kane is that this guy who was 26 was given his first film, and he went out and hit the... Now, people in the comment section were saying they just don't like the movie. That's fine. And I'm not saying it's my favorite movie because it's not in my top 10 favorite movies. I'm speaking as a filmmaker and as a film person who understands the mechanics of how the machine works. So I think it's the greatest film ever made. But it's certainly not my favorite film, and it's not in my top 10 favorite films. But nevertheless, there it was. And a 26-year-old had the confidence, that's really the word, the confidence, to go in there and do that. And he had more than the confidence. He had an obsession with the details, which brings me to one of my favorite moments in all of movies, and one of the films that are my top 10 favorite films, and that's Ed Wood. I've talked about this before. There's a scene in Ed Wood was the guy who directed Plan 9 from Outer Space and was working in Hollywood approximately the same time as Wells. Wells was kind of on the downslope of his career. And Ed Wood, nobody knew he was. He was making films for $15,000. But there's a scene in Ed Wood where Ed Wood, who's played by Johnny Depp, goes to Musso and Frank's, I want to say. Famous kind of a bar and grill, and it's deserted, and he's gone there a couple times. We've seen this already, And he's drowning his sorrows because he's gotten this bad review or something bad has happened. He's constantly fighting off all of these, putting out all these fires, just trying to keep the dream alive. And he looks into one of the back rooms, and sitting at a table there by himself is Orson Welles, doing, making some notes on the script. The guy who played him is I've forgotten his name. He was the guy who went nuts in Full Metal Jacket. And my friend Maurice LaMarche did the voice. So the point of this is one of my favorite movies in film history. Vincent D'Onofrio, thank you. Is because, and I didn't have time to think about this till after the movie was over, and then I thought about it nonstop since after the movie was over for the last 20 years or whatever. You got these two guys. They're both young guys. They're both passionate about what they do. They're both absolutely committed to film. 100%. This is their entire lives. They live and breathe it. They're absolutely it. And here's the best film director of all time, and here's the worst film director of all time. Now, this is a fictional conversation, but that's okay because that doesn't really matter. And I'm looking at these two guys, and the movie is set up in such a way to give you a sense that they're both, they're both working directors, which is technically true. And it gets you thinking, all right, well, if this is the worst director of all time and this is the best director of all time, having a conversation, they both love movies, what's different about them? There's got to be something different between them, right? Because one's the very best at his job and one's the very worst. What is it? What is it? And when you look at the movie backwards in that light, then you realize that the difference is discretion. Discernment is probably a better word. There's a classic moment. It's all you need to know about Ed Wood. Happens relatively early in the movie. He's got Tor Johnson, or the guy playing Tor Johnson, this big monster. He's carrying this, this damsel who's fainted. He's carrying her out of this lab. He's on a movie set, and as they're coming out of the door, her foot bangs the set. And since it's a flat, it's just a canvas flat. It just goes wooga 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 wooga. And the cameraman, the director of photography, says, "Okay, Ed, I'm sorry, we're going to have to tee that one up again." I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, you hit the set. You see the wall moving." No one will never notice. Let's move on. Wells took 3 days to light one shot. 3 days to light one shot. And that's the difference between the best director and the worst director. Is the discernment, is the eye for the detail. The curse of all of this is perfectionism is what's required in order to be a great artist, but you also have to be willing to kick the baby out the door, and that's the hard part. There are people whose perfectionism prevents them from starting scripts or finishing scripts or ever getting anything done. I'm very guilty of this myself. But nevertheless, that's the magic formula, is you have to be as obsessive about every single detail as you possibly can until such time as it's time to boot it out the door. And that's where you need a strong producer. We were talking about this last week with Peter Jackson, who's got that exact same gene sequence. The details have to be perfect. All of the warriors of Rohan had equally elaborate armor because even though the camera wouldn't see it, nevertheless, it is important that they all get it right. So you have to be driving to this perfection. You have to be driving towards getting every single thing you can. But the difference between that and perfectionism as a disadvantage is you got to do it. You got to get it out the door. They say the perfect is the enemy of the good, and that's true. But you can't aim for being good. You got to aim for being perfect. And you have to also have the emotional maturity to know that you're not going to get it. You're going to spend your entire life aiming for something you will never hit, and that's the secret sauce as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, let's move on and see what we got here. George Freeland, what part of writing a story is the easiest for you, and which is the most difficult? Well, the most difficult part is the writing. I can write setting background for hours at risk of avoiding writing the actual story while I dread having to come up with supporting characters past the first three. Here is the great, there's a great quote from Woody Fool in the comment section. It says, "You never make a perfect movie, you just run out of time." That's about it. I'd not heard that quote before, but that is it. absolutely 100% directly, precisely what I was just trying to say. You just try to make a perfect movie until you run out of time. Here's the thing about writing, George, and I'll never understand this as long as I live. And it's important that I do. I don't think much of Stephen King's politics, needless to say, but I I worship the ground that he walks on when it comes to his discipline. I mean, he just gets up every day and starts writing at 8:30 and writes till 4 or whatever. It's what he does. It's his job. And he doesn't have to. He's got the discipline. He's figured out how to do it, and many people haven't. But here's the thing about writing that constantly perplexes me, and I don't know how it happens, and I don't know how to get over it. I will usually do anything other than writing. If I have something to write, I would rather do the laundry. I would rather clean the cat boxes. I'd rather do anything than write. Anything than write. And I'll only write when I absolutely have to. And yet, here's the paradox. When I sit down and do it, I love it. And it's not like I've been doing this for 2 weeks now, you know? I mean, I started writing screenplays when I was 16. Full-length screenplays, I've probably written 12 of them. And it stayed with me my entire life. I am absolutely loathe the process until I start the process. And then when I start the process, I just love it and I don't want to stop. So what's going on there? Well, what's going on there is got something to do with the perfectionism we were talking about earlier, but it's actually a little different flavor. When you have an idea in your head, the idea still, I never thought of it this way. Let's say you've got an idea for a movie that you want to write, and you've been cogitating, chewing it over. That movie, this just came to me. That movie is Schrodinger's screenplay. It's Schrodinger's screenplay. It exists in a quantum state of yes and no and neither and both at the same time. In other words, it's something you really know is good and you haven't made any choices yet. So it is in a state of perpetual possibility. It's Schrodinger's screenplay. And the reason that people have such a hard time writing is because the second you put the first letter on the page, you start compressing down the possibilities of what that script could be into what it is actually going to be. And there is so much of a sense of exclusion. I've never thought about this before in my life. I have to tell you, this one's worth probably the money for the Stratosphere Lounge thing, because this is actually a fairly interesting thought, which has never occurred to me. But that's really what it is. You're locking out possibilities. And that is disappointing because in Schrodinger's screenplay, you know that this scene is just perfect and you got a pretty good idea what they're going to say. But when you put it down, I find, okay, now I've locked out certain things and this is okay, but it's not quite what I wanted it to be. And that can be such a disappointment that it's conditioning. It's just psychological conditioning. It's a bad feeling, and so you don't want to have that bad feeling. But that's basically what you have to do. The thing about screen, which part of writing a story is easiest for you, and which is the most difficult? The easiest for me is usually the dialogue, and the reason I like writing the dialogue, I've never written a screenplay that I hadn't already cast in my head before I started writing it. That's probably cheating and can be a problem downstream when you ends up that you're not going to get Ian McShane to be in your little student film. But nevertheless, I always have the movie cast in my head before I write it, because not only do I need to know what their appearance is, I need to be able to have them in my mind be clear. And I'll usually pick somebody who's done something in a movie that I liked. So when I was last full-length screenplay I finished was Aurora back in 2007, I think. And I had just watched Deadwood, and I thought Deadwood was the greatest thing I've ever seen. And so I cast, the program manager was Al Swearingen. It's just that simple. I just plain stole it. I just wrote it for him. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's certainly nothing wrong with that on the first draft and stuff. So the hardest part is the hardest. I really enjoyed developing the thing in my head. I really enjoy, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, I could throw this in, all these little pieces of chrome that appear to you in the shower and all this. I love that. That's fun. But the hardest part is actually putting it on paper and locking out the possibilities of what it could have been, and locking them into what they are. And that is always disappointing. But there are moments when the story really runs, and there are some moments, magical moments, where the story actually writes you. And that is a very, very remarkable experience. And what I mean by that is you can have characters in mind or a scene in mind, and you can start this scene, and then something happens to your head in real time, and and the next thing you know, this scene is going someplace where you never ever imagined it would go, and you're actually kind of like watching it. It's like, oh, for things like Big Bad Problems, which I never actually I have extensive notes on. I've seen that movie. I've seen Big Bad Problems 200 times. Every scene in it, every shot in it, I've seen 200 times. I just watch it, and every time I watch it, I think, oh, that would be cool, and then I add that to the next time I watch it. But when that thing takes over like that, it's just magical, and you just need to let it go. The advice for beginning writers is don't ever go backwards. I started talking about that with the animation on the beginning of this show. Never, ever, ever, ever go backwards. If you're writing a first draft, you do not ever go back. You don't change anything. You don't change spelling. Don't change punctuation. Don't change anything. You never ever go backwards. It's got to be a ratchet. You are on your first draft. You will go forward all the way through. And if there's an enormous, yeah, I just saw it's a somebody said there's a shooting star in the studio. It's actually a little gnat. You can never go backwards. If you do, you're finished. You'll never get out of it ever. You'll never get out of it. You will just sit there and rewrite the first act until you're just bored with it and anybody else, and then you're gone. So you just keep going. Now, somebody described to me, I thought this was very cool, described the first draft of a movie as clear, here it comes again, as clearing the ground. It's almost like you're over the canopy in Vietnam and you drop a daisy cutter. That's what the first draft is, basically. It just clears the ground and allows you to stake out where the camp is going to be. You're just cutting all the garbage. You're just putting something there. You're putting something on the ground. And it doesn't have to be anything like the finished product, but you got to get it done. You got to clear the brush. So never look back. The movies are structured in 3-act structure, and every single writer who starts writing thinks they know better than every other writer that ever lived, and I don't need to conform to the 3-act film structure. It's so predictable. It's all it is mechanical films, and it's just a machine, and I'm not making corporate. No. It turns out that watching a movie is an experience. It's like swimming or riding a bicycle, and there are limits to how much time you can spend on this, and there is a rhythm to it, and when you've had, I don't guess there have been millions of films made. There's certainly been hundreds of thousands, maybe, I don't know. Released feature films? No, not millions, I wouldn't think. But nevertheless, when something's been done this often, you begin to get into a formula, and the reason it's a formula is because it works. This is also something that's a little hard to get comfortable with. When I started doing public speaking, and I was doing the What We Believe series, there were 6 different episodes, and I would go out and I'd talk about all 6 of them. And so it was the same speech. I gave that same speech again and again and again. I probably gave it 30, 40 times, I guess. And I would do it one way, and I'd like this, and then I'd drop something I didn't think was working, I'd add something. If I added something that was really good, especially if it was funny, I would keep that, and then I just kind of, And what I found was after 7, 8, 9 different deliveries of that speech, I had it down to the point where it doesn't get better than this, that any changes I make now are going to make it worse. And I always felt like I was ripping people off by giving them the same speech that I just gave. Now I'm doing the Oceanside Women's Republican Club, and I'm giving them verbatim the speech I just gave to the Camarillo Women's Republican Club. And I thought it was kind of cheating, that it was kind of ripping them off. And I realized suddenly, no, actually, changing it would be ripping them off, because there is one best way to tell this story, and you have managed to triangulate on it. That's the word. You triangulate on it. So, over the course of millions and billions of audience hours watching movies, artists and writers and directors and all the rest of it have managed to triangulate on what the movie going experience is. And it's a 3-act structure. A lot of plays are 5-act structures. But movies are 3-act structures, and you need to understand this. And if you're trying to sell a screenplay, if you don't have this down, you can just forget about selling it. Even if you're trying to make a story, you need to be within 3 or 4 pages of these numbers, believe it or not. Page 1 is Act 1. Act 1 hits a plot point. A plot point is where something happens. A plot point is where something occurs. In Star Wars, the first plot point is he meets Ben Kenobi, and he's no longer a farmer. Now he's going to go out and try to rescue the princess. That's the plot point at the end of Act 1. So you've got 26, 27 pages to set up the before, because every movie is a before and after. That's why the characters have an arc. Things used to be this way, and then the movie happens, and now they're this way. And so you've got 26 pages to set up what you need to set up. And then right around page 27 or 28, within a page or two of that, something has to happen. And then you got 2 pages to basically tie up the loose ends of getting him out of the farm, and then you're into the second act. So the first act is 30 pages. Second act is 60 pages. Second act is where most of your stuff actually happens. That's where most of your story is. This is where the character meets the villain. The hero meets the villain. The hero meets the villain. And every time the hero meets the villain, they have to have higher stakes. You can't have them meet and have a light sword battle the first time and then have them play dominoes the second time. It just doesn't work that way. Now, Bart's Treasures here is saying it's true, but you can also be done in a non-formulatic way. This is the point I'm trying to make. Now, I don't get to read the comments. I glance at them. So I'm not putting words in your mouth here. But yes, this is... It cannot be done in a non-formulatic way. This is the point I'm trying to make here, is that it can't be done as well as this way. This is why it's this way. The reason it's this way is because this is the best way to do it. So you got from page 30 to page 90, that's 60 pages, to basically tell your story. And you have to, right around page 86, 87, somewhere in there, right around the end of the second act, you have to have your characters at the absolute bottom. This is where everything is gone as wrong as it can. That's the dark night of the soul. And then the third act spins you into the climax. You've already got the stakes. You know who everybody is. You know who the villains are. You've been building. Everything's building to this third act. And then you have 30 pages basically to either have a happy ending or a sad ending. But whatever outcome you're going to have begins on page 91 and ends on page 120. And you can play around with these things. And some expert filmmakers can go 2-3 hours. I don't think they can go 3 hours. But good filmmaker can go 2.5. And this is how it works. Woody Full points out that's the story of the hero's journey. It's how we're wired. This is biological, guys. My very strong belief is that this is a biological thing. This is how our brains have evolved to learn, is through stories. That's how we learn. We personalize things. We get advice. We get morality. We get all of it through stories. So there it is. It's got to be that way if you want it to be good. And if you change that, you can. That's the great thing about freedom, right? You write whatever you want to. And when I was young, I thought, why should I have to lock myself into this formula? Because you don't have to do anything, Bill. It just means that you're not mature enough to understand that there are people who are better at this than you are. And this is what they've all come to agree on. And this is kind of like conservative politics, right? I mean, all the things that we believe in as conservatives in terms of politics are tried and true principles. So why don't we just try new stuff? Progressives are trying new stuff all the time. What's wrong with trying new stuff? It's a really good question, isn't it? I mean, the progressives, if it's new, they want to do it. And conservatives are like, no. Why? Because conservatives have been aware long enough to realize that we're not the first people to live on this planet, and most all of the good ideas have already been taken, and most all of the good ideas have been taken, and most of the bad ideas have already been tried too. And so our heritage is a heritage of trial and error, and it gives us a tremendous base. But if you're going to go ahead and destroy what natural selection has made the optimal structure because you're so sure of yourself, then you're going to fail. It's such a it's such a hackneyed expression, but it's true. You got to know the rules before you can break them. And I don't know many filmmakers who break them. I really can't think of anybody who intentionally breaks them, you know? And so that's kind of where it goes. So the hardest part for me, George, is locking out the probabilities on Schrodinger's screenplay. And the easiest part is the dialogue, because if I have those characters cast in my head, I can let them go and have fun. Then you got to cut. And that's another reason, by the way, and probably the best reason for sticking to this 120-page formula is I wrote a first draft of something that was 360 pages. It's insane. And I was convinced you couldn't get it below 300. Just can't do it. The first draft of the John Paul Jones thing was 14,000 words. Got it to 6. Now you gotta cut. And the nice thing about having if you don't get it to 125 pages, then no one's going to look at it. If you have to cut things, you will find a way. And I've never ever cut things to a hard time limit and made it worse. I've always found myself to say, this is not possible. And then I find a way to do it. And then I look at it, it's like, this is so much better. This is so much better. All right, here we go. Eduardo Henrique. Hey, greetings, Bill. Wizard13 here. Hey, how are you, Eduardo? I know you accompany the works of Neurotic Drinker and the like, and I'm glad you plan to open a pop culture related channel because you got me as a fan all the way from Germany with an interview with Joshua Phillip on Star Wars. Well, thank you. That was a fun day. That's what made me look at the entirety of your content. But the reason I write this now is because I've seen the recent podcast from Neurotic, and I think you absolutely should somehow reach out and have a talk with them. I've been thinking about this quite a lot lately, actually. Be it an interview format or just plain podcast with super chats, I'm 100% sure you would do wonders for each other's audience, and both would expand your own. Even if you just stick as a guest on their weekly podcasts or given your current full plate, trust me, this would greatly help new people knowing you. Remember, that's how you got me here. Here's a link to his most recent podcast if you haven't heard it yet. Best of luck and my very best regards. Thank you very much, Eduardo. That was very kind. I have been thinking about this a great deal. And to be honest with you, the reason I haven't done it is because I'm not convinced that they know enough about who I am to have me on the show. That's my concern, to be honest with you. I mean, I just think, go up and talk to these guys and say, hey, I'd like to be on your podcast. Well, who are you? It's like, well, I'm a guy. But I'm a guy with, 70 million views. So that may sway things. Yes, I would like to talk to them. I would like to talk to Nerdrotic and Drinker and all of them and Doomcock, because they understand what's being done to the pop culture. They understand it. And they see the mechanisms of it. And they probably see that better than I do. But I don't think they fully get the why. So I'm going to prioritize this, Eduardo. Thanks to your kind words there. And if anybody knows how to reach these guys, that'd be great. I would love to. I'd love to do those shows. And the worst thing they can say is we don't know who you are, or we didn't get the email, in which case I don't do it. And I'm already not on their shows. Now, Drinker is not so much a pop culture guy as he is a film critic. He's a superb film critic. The only person I've ever seen better is the guy who plays Plinkett over on Red State Media. But he really, really knows his stuff. And it's funny, I was in the elevator on the way up to the lounge here, and I was thinking about, I edited the Fauci Moving Back to America, and I shot another one this morning called, I said Red Letter Media, called Give It to Them. And it's about banning video cards. California has banned high-end computer gaming PCs. Did you know that? I'm not joking. They have. You cannot buy a top-of-the-line PC in California. They will not ship it to you. And the reason is because the 3070 series of video cards consumes too much electricity. I just laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. I thought, oh, this is great. So I did the whole first minute and a half, 2 minutes of the Today's Moving Back to America, which will probably go up in the next day or two. I did it as like a drug deal. I just had a big ass video card with me, and I just said, "Come here, man. You look like a gamer." Did a close up like I'm selling this thing illegally out of my car. And it was really, really, really fun to do it. You know, it's like, no, I know it's not a 3070, man. I can't be seen here with a 3070 in my lap. Some cop rolls up on me or something. I'm sitting here with a 3070 on my lap. Are you out of your mind? I know it's a 2080. I can just say, hey, man, I found this on the parking lot. It's not my video card. I don't know whose video card it is. Just there it was. I was going to go turn it in. So I did the whole thing like a drug deal. And it's really, really fun. And the thing that I would like to talk to these guys about is why the pop culture is being destroyed. They know it's being destroyed, but I don't think they understand the objective, the political objective. And both of them, or all of them, Doomcock Drinker and Nerdrotic, have danced around the what I think is the core of it, and that is that the people, they have said this verbatim, I'm not trying to claim I'm ahead of them on this one, is that all of these shows are being run by people with no talent and people who don't know the franchises, or what they do know about them, they hate. So the bigger point is that really, when you get right down to it, the bigger point is that progressives can't write. They can't. It's not a coincidence. They can't write. I talked about, and this would be a useful thing to say on one of their shows, I talked about the idea of latching on to Discovery and having Mikey Spock be, Mr. Spock's sister. It's a form of stolen valor. It's stolen valor. You've got a character that's iconic and has earned his place in the pop culture over the course of decades. And now they want to basically dress up like a SEAL, and they want the glory and they want the admiration, but they're too scared to open a jackknife. They don't know how to write, and they can't. Their philosophy locks them out of being able to be good writers because they're all about identity politics, right? That's the whole thing. That's what progressivism is today. Okay, so if you're going to have a heroine or a hero, who am I kidding? Heroine, and they're going to be a progressive, then in order for you to write this well, you have to put that people through the dirt, and they have to fail. And furthermore, they not only have to fail, they have to fail because of character flaws. They have to fail because of internal character flaws that creates the failure within them. And it's the overcoming of these failures and these character flaws that makes them into heroes. But because they are so deeply into identity politics, the idea of having somebody who they're trying to promote as a strong, powerful, diverse female, the idea of putting them into trouble, especially weakness is a better word, putting them into a scene of weakness, especially as a result of their own character flaws, they can't do it. They can't. They just can't do it. They cannot do it. And that's why everything they write sucks. And that's why they have to steal the valor of people who do know how to write. This is what drama is. This is what drama is. It's overcoming your flaws. And to say this is a rookie mistake, it's a rookie mistake that I still can't shake. I really have to work hard at this. Because when you are writing something, you're writing something because you want to make a point. And when you're writing a screenplay, what you're really doing is you're saying, I want to be this guy. When I'm writing Luke Skywalker, if I'm George Lucas and I'm writing Luke Skywalker, then I am basically putting myself in the movie to give the entire world my perception of how I think things are and how they work. It's universal force of evil, and you start out all of it. So George Lucas is Luke Skywalker in those scripts. And all of your lead characters The ones that are the voice of the movie, that's you. And since it's your philosophy, and since it's what you're trying to say, I'm trying to make this point that good triumphs over evil. Okay, well, if good triumphs over evil and Luke Skywalker is going to be the force of good, then what do? Well, I can't have Luke be evil because I'm trying to show that good triumphs over evil. Well, then you've got a Mary Sue. You've got a one-dimensional character. You have to have the discipline and the wisdom and the foresight and the maturity to say the only way that you can make this good character good is by making them do evil things and then atone for them. Otherwise, there's no metric. You can't. There's nothing to measure it by. It's like putting one of those sticks out in the middle of the bay with a feet mark, rainfall levels or something. You have to have a metric, and you cannot have a character become a good character by being good all the time. You've got nothing to compare it to, and life doesn't work that way anyway. Life doesn't work that way. Good people are good people because they overcome the evil inside their hearts, and everybody's got it. And this is how you write a compelling story. And the other thing I would talk about is that the other thing that progressives are enslaved to, and this is really much more obvious, is they are absolutely enslaved to the idea of magical thinking. The idea that if I tell you that you're a really bright kid, then you'll be a bright kid. And if I tell you that you can be a president of the United States, then you'll go out and be president of the United States. It's the self-esteem thing. Because the one thing you notice about these characters is none of them want to do the work. None of them want to do the work needed to pull that off. It's heavy lifting being clever. It's heavy lifting thinking of ways to basically have your characters be doing awful things, but in a way that makes people identify with them and not permanently tarnish them. There's a scene I wrote in my head for the second of those Aurora movies back 10 years ago or a little more. Not the first one, the second one. And I was going to set up a whole like offshoot of humanity that is going down the genetic modification path. And the scene I wrote was a scene where this guy is talking to kind of the Aurora crew, the guys who just done the Jupiter mission. So they've got 100 engineers in an auditorium. And this guy is coming out and he's basically saying something like this. He's saying, look, we all are spending all of our time and effort looking for an Earth-like planet because that's what we're wired to do. We're wired to find an Earth-like planet because we evolved on Earth and we like the idea of open air and sunshine, and these things appeal to us, and the idea of sitting in a metal tube doesn't. But what if we could change the genetic structure of people so that they didn't want wide open spaces, that the idea of a metal tube inside an asteroid is the great driver of their passion? That's what I want. I want to live in a metal tube with bad air conditioning. We can do that, he's saying, right? He's saying it's just something we can breed out of people. And he says, and I'll show you an example. And this is a scene I wrote, which I could never film. And he's got a little box and he's got this puppy. And he holds this puppy and he pets it. It's a beautiful little puppy, isn't it? And he just breaks its neck and throws it to the ground. Now, as it turns out, all the people in the room rise up and practically lynch the guy. But the point he's making is that reaction that you just had is a coded genetic reaction, and it is possible to remove that reaction from you. And so now you have now you know what genuine evil looks like, right? Is somebody who is using pure intellect to reduce or eliminate emotional constraints on murder. But that's a scene you could never film. You might be able to show it off camera with a Yelp. Even then, you'd be really pushing it. But nevertheless, you just there it is. So anyway, that's that. Let's move on. We'll do a couple more, and then I would like to get on going here. And there's one non-entertainment one I'm going to take right after this. Gabriel Flansha. Hey, Bill. Hey, Gabriel. I would love a new movie with an iconic actor. How far are we from a new movie with John Wayne, Humphrey Bogart, or James Dean? That's a great question. I had my mouth open to say, well, we're one movie away. You know, right? You never know who's going to break and who's going to really stand out. I remember of all the new actors that I've seen in the last 10 years, only like two or three that really made me say, okay, this guy I could really, could see myself watching for the rest of my life. And strangely enough, one of those people was Channing Tatum. I just thought he was so refreshing. I saw him in The Eagle, the Roman Legion movie. And I thought this guy he's got charisma, and there's something fundamentally clean about him. There's something just clean about the guy. And so that's not really the issue. The issue is they can't make movies that are any good anymore because good movies are about generally speaking, they're about heroic men. And I'm speaking of which, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on this, but I saw, I forget what it's called now. It came out a couple years ago, and it's Natalie Portman, and there's this shimmering wall, and their husbands disappear there. It's kind of a body snatchers kind of thing, and it will show up in the comment section here in just a few seconds. And so the premise of this is that these 5 women are going into this thing to scout it out. And you see them lined up in the bushes, and each one of them's got their survival packs on, and they got their, they got their wife beater tees on, and they got their M4s slung over their thing, and they got all and they're just looking like 4 badasses walking into the forest. These 4 women, 5 women, and Annihilation. Thank you. And I looked at this and I just said, I just don't believe it. I don't believe it. I can believe that Natalie Portman would go on an expedition to discover what's behind the shimmer, but I will not believe that Natalie Portman is going to be the person carrying the semi-automatic rifle responsible for defending herself. I just won't buy that. I will not buy it. And it looked absolutely stupid. It just looked really dumb. And it looked like, here is your lesson, you will take it. I think, just so we're clear, I think I have seen a few movies where they get this exactly right, where you can have women in action movies and get it exactly right. And the one that really strings to superheroes get a pass, because if you're a superhero, you got superhero powers. But the one that comes to mind when I think about really good women characters in action movies was the one on Oh Dark 30, where it was that CIA officer. And the moment that really sold it to me was late in the movie, where you've got your SEALs about to go in, and it wasn't like she wasn't going to go in with the SEALs, and she wasn't going to, give Bin Laden a chop to the neck. She knows where he is. And there's a scene there where the rest of these guys are basically saying, come on, man, what's the chance of him being there? Do you believe that he's in there? And he says, I don't know, but she does. She believes it. And that is great. That's just great. Believable, all of it. I don't know, I think one of the things, Gabriel, is that they're not allowed to make movies that make movie stars anymore. Because of what a movie star has to be and has to do. I mean, a movie star doesn't get to be, a movie star like a John Wayne or a Gary Cooper or any of them, Brad Pitt even. They don't get to be movie stars by being sensitive, supportive men who are, making the rice while the woman ammos up and gets her, her Beretta ready for the patrol. It just doesn't work that way. It's tough. I do think that they're going to come from the pop culture. I think that movies are really just on their, as we understand them, are on their final days, and that more and more of the stuff we see is going to come from talented people outside the system. But you can still have people that show up and do a really good job and really make an impression. Anyway, that one's a little tougher. This one's not got anything to do with movies, uh, but I want to take this one, and maybe I'll do two more after that, and I'll call it a day. Um, and this one's from Gerard Rupert. And it's like, what are your thoughts on the FAA saying that Branson, Bezos, and friends are not astronauts? I don't know that the FAA said that. I didn't hear about that, but I can tell you this. Bezos is an astronaut and Branson isn't. Bezos did a suborbital flight and Branson did a suborbital flight. And he tried to define space down. And I saw a commercial on YouTube that was even more shameless about this. It was a company called something like Into Space or something like this. It's a very clever company, British company. And they basically take things. In this case, it was an ad for a blender, like a portable smoothie blender. And they put it on this crate and they fill up a balloon. And this thing goes to the top of the stratosphere. It's probably 150,000, 160,000 feet, somewhere around there, so halfway. But the curvature of the Earth is there, and the sky is black, and so on. And they're saying that they made it into space. They're saying, here's how you can have your product be in space. Well, you're not in space. You're up high. There is a line called the Kármán line, which everybody knows about. It's defined as 100 kilometers. It has been universally accepted for the last several years or decades that this is the legal boundary, the official boundary of space. And this is a bugbear for me. They changed it so that tourists will not be considered astronauts. Well, what was would Krista McAuliffe, if Challenger hadn't exploded, would she be an astronaut? What about any of those other payload specialists? They're not pilots. What about people who spend I'm talking to the FAA now, a week or 5 days on board the space station? They're not an astronaut. They're not pilots, but everybody else who's been up there has been astronauts and not been pilots. Technically speaking, the guys in the Mercury capsule weren't really much of pilots in terms of what they had to do. There are many good arguments being made, says Nolan, that 80 kilometers, 50 miles is just as much space as 100 kilometers. The U.S. has always used 50 miles. Kármán's definition has to do with gravity forces dominating aero forces, which happens at about 80 kilometers. Well, here's where I'm going with this one. I think that's reasonable, and if 50 miles is a reasonable number, that's great. But here's the thing that really, 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 really bothers me. When Burt Rutan made Spaceship One, you get to pick a tail number. Usually, you can get a tail number that you want, as long as it applies to the format. And in the United States, the format for a civil aircraft starts with a letter, and in America, that letter is N for November. And the reason it's N is for North America, believe it or not. So every domestically registered aircraft starts with the letter N on the tail. And then usually you get to pick three numbers and two letters. That's the general format. 384 Delta Bravo is a plane I flew a lot of. 304 Delta Foxtrot I flew a lot of. 503 Delta Golf, all of them. So November, three numbers, two letters. And so Burt Rutan decided, well, we get to put a tail number on Spaceship One. If it's available, what tail number should we use? And he didn't go with, 000BD for BR for Burt Rutan. The tail that he put on Spaceship One was November 328 Kilo Foxtrot. And that means that November means it's an American registered craft. 328 is 328K. 328K is 328,000 feet. The tail number on Spaceship One was 328,000 feet. November 328 Kilo Foxtrot. 328,000 feet. And the thing that I have such a big problem with is, if Burt had flown Spaceship One to 327,999 feet, that would have been a failure. and he would have said that was a failure. In fact, on the first flight, the one that Mike Melville actually broke the 100-kilometer limit, got to 328,400 feet. Mike, the pilot, Mike Melville, was convinced that they hadn't made it because he was having a hard time trying to get the thing to make the turn, and he was convinced that he hadn't done the turn early enough and they didn't have enough boost. So when he landed, he basically got out of the Spaceship One and said, "Hey, Bert, I'm sorry, I kind of just screwed the pooch there. I just didn't get its nose up fast enough." And Bert said, "No, you made it." Bert. Everybody's looking at the video. Bert's looking at the radar from Edwards, 328,400 feet. So the thing that bothers me is this redefining down the goalposts, because this is the curse of our age. We don't do well enough on exams, so we grade on the curve. That's what we do, and it's the end of civilization. This is why I'm so proud to be Bert's friend and Mike's friend and Dick's friend and all the rest of it, because he put on the vehicle, he put the goal on the vehicle, 328,000 feet. If this thing doesn't get to that altitude, then the plane's a failure, and that is integrity, and that's how things work, right? This is our goal, and if we fall short of the goal, we don't get to declare victory. We can say we learned something, and we can say, okay, well, we'll do better next time. But we don't get to declare victory. And that's what it was about the Branson thing. They had been using, Spaceship One had used the Kármán line, 328,000 feet, 100 kilometers. And so had just about everybody else. And then just a few days before they flight on Virgin Galactic, they make the announcement that Branson's going to go. And then all during that live feed, it's like, as they come back from space, which has been universally recognized as 50 miles, again and 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 again. They're giving us this sales pitch. And if you want to officially change the limit and the boundary, okay, that's fine with me. But you don't get to do it as a result of not having hit the altitude that you knew was the target when you went into it. When Spaceship Two took over from Spaceship One, when that design went from scaled composites to Virgin Galactic, it was designed to get to 328,000 feet because that was the definition of space, and they didn't do it. And so they, instead of saying, hey, it's a work in progress, we got a better engine on the next one, so next one we'll get there, but we got to 3/4 of the way, so that's a step in the right direction. No, that's not what they did. They declared victory when they had a suborbital flight, and that's the part that I find intolerable. So anyway, there we go. This will be the last one, I think. So from Clay Bradley, last movie you sat down and enjoyed without being sucker punched? For me, it was Ford versus Ferrari. Probably the greatest motorsport story ever told. The movie barely scratched the surface of it. Geez, Clay, if I had to think about the last film that I sat down and enjoyed without being sucker punched, I'm going to go with Ford versus Ferrari. Yeah, I think that's what I would pick. I think I picked Ford versus Ferrari because it's not just it sounds to me from the way the question's written that you really understand motorsports, but Ford versus Ferrari is just a great film, and it's a great film for the classical reasons that it's a great film. By the way, I will forget this if I don't say this right now. I have seen the new trailers, as most of you have, the new trailer for Dune, and I will be surprised and very disappointed if this doesn't turn out to be one of the greatest films ever made, only because of the director and the cast, and the storyline is so good enough. The new trailer for Dune made me look at this and I said, I think this is going to be one of the greatest films that have ever been made, because if they stay anywhere close to the story, and they sure look like they're going to, I know the story is going to hold up, but visually it's just mind-boggling, and the casting is insane. So I have high hopes for that. Anyway, let's see. So back to Ford versus Ferrari. So what was it about Ford versus Ferrari that worked so well? I mean, we're talking about entertainment here. So what is it about that movie that's so successful? Well, first of all, you've got the car racing, and that's just an interesting universe to set your story in. I mean, there's a lot of drama in car racing. It's exciting, it's fast. It's not like they're a chess tournament, and there have been films about chess tournaments. But so you get a lot of action, and the action gets a chance to kind of get your heart beat up and push you through the movie. But that's not why the movie was such a great movie. The movie was a great movie because it had so many classical elements in it. And among those, among the three classical elements are, first of all, you've got the mismatched buddy story. Ford versus Ferrari is essentially a romance movie, and I'm not. I can say that without having to squirm because I'm not going to fall to this cynicism that the left has put into everything. It's obviously it's a bromance, but I didn't go with that term because it's important to get to the heart of it. It is a romance movie, and I don't mean a romance in the way that people would want to spin this. I mean, these two guys actually genuinely loved each other as men, as individuals, and it's about the love of these two guys for each other and all of that comes with it, and the fact that neither one of them can do this without the other one, the fact that both of them are very specific and flawed, and together they make something greater than the sum of their parts. That movie is about the relationship between these two people. Dave Big Booty says, just like Red and Andy in Shawshank. That's exactly right. It's not just that they're friends. It's much bigger than that. It's much, much bigger than that. So you've got this movie, and now you've got the whole thing turning around in terms of the operations of, is it going to work or not? The whole thing comes down to, does the audience believe that Christian Bale and Ben Affleck are friends, that they really are friends? And yes, 100%, 100%. It's absolutely fantastic. And so you're 3/4 of the way home already. You got an action story, and you've got great actors. You've got they obviously like each other enough to sell the movie. I think I've seen them in a promotional interview for it, and they're goofing around a lot. So the core of it is there, and then on top of that, you've got all of the other elements that just push you towards wanting to love a movie. You've got the underdog story, right? I mean, it's hard to believe that Ford is the underdog, but that's actually what the whole thing was about. And so you've got the scrappy underdog. You've got the guys that are improvising and never doing it before and trying new things against the factory, the formula. That's Ferrari. And there is one speech. It's probably 3 lines in Ford versus Ferrari. And if you remove those 3 lines, then you don't have a movie. It just plain goes. I will wait for a few moments. Anybody want to guess, if you've seen the movie, what that critical 3-4 lines are in Ford versus Ferrari, without which there is no movie? Because to me, the second I saw it, I realized, okay, this is it. I'm going to just wait for another second or two, and I have too much dead air. All right, I will no longer keep anyone in suspense. The reason that film works is because there are 3-4 lines in the early part of that movie, and that is the part where Ford wants to basically buy Ferrari, and Ferrari actual says to the president of Ford, who's like the grandson or something, he says, "You make ugly cars for stupid people," something like that. He's been given a chance. Ferrari is in deep trouble, and Ford offers to basically bail him out. And it's Enzo Ferrari, yeah. And Enzo Ferrari not only declines the offer, but he insults him, and he insults him in the perfect way. He hits him right exactly where he's tender. This film was set in the early 60s, so it's not like, I mean, Ford's a gigantic success, one of the biggest companies in the world. Ferrari's going out of business. How do you insult Ford if you're Ferrari? You say you make ugly cars. I don't remember what the exact line is, but for stupid people. Yes, so he's insulted, and Dwayne just beat me to it. He's not just insulting Henry Ford. He's insulting Americans. and he's insulting America. Because Ford Motor Company and Henry Ford and the production line, the Model T, all of that, this is America. This is the national identity. We're a car country. And basically what he's saying is, I spit on your money because despite the fact that you got all this success, we are the only people that really know how to do this and make cars, and you're just a nation of barbarians. That's exactly it. You're a nation of savages, and go and pound sand. We don't need your money, and we'll kick your ass. And if that scene's not there, then not only does the rest of the movie not make sense. In other words, why would Ford go to the trouble? Was it the Formula One? Why would they put the money into the story? Why would they hire the Matt Damon character and the driver and all the rest of it? Why? You are not your father. Thank you, uptick Mick. That's a big part of it too. See, that's in there as well. You're not the man that your father was or your grandfather was. You are the lesser son of a greater father. And it is just plain, it's just perfect. And the real hero of that movie, he's not the reason he's not what makes it works, but if he's not working, the film falls apart, is the guy who played Henry Ford. Overweight, fat guy, essentially zero charisma, looks like a suit. He's almost like the stereotypical bad guy. He's the corporate suit, but he's a Ford guy. He's got cars in his blood, and the scene that puts the button on this is the scene where he takes him for a ride in that vehicle, and Ford is terrified and exhilarated at the same time. He practically craps his pants and he's laughing at the top of his lungs. That's a car guy. And now you understand why the story has power. Because now we're talking about, okay, it's Ford versus Ferrari. It's so funny. Sometimes things that are so obvious, you're probably going to just laugh at this. I think you guys are probably going to just laugh at this because I didn't realize this until just this second. Every time I hear the name of that movie up until this instant, I hear Ford versus Ferrari, and I think Ford Motor Company versus Ferrari Motors. That's Ford versus Ferrari, the company versus the company. It's like, no, it's Enzo Ferrari versus Henry Ford. It's Ford versus Ferrari. It's the individuals. That's what it's about. I never ever thought about that till just this second because there's a Ford and there goes a Ferrari. Ford versus Ferrari. This car versus that car. No, it's the guy versus the guy. And once that insult is issued, the movie, not just Enzo Ferrari, the movie throws the gauntlet down at the feet of an American audience. It basically says, F you. We're Ferrari. We don't need your stinking peasant money. You're a nation of savages. Kick your ass. And that really angers Henry Ford Jr. And it really angers the audience. And because it's so personal, because it's such a personal insult, it justifies every single dime that Ford spends on this in terms of justifying, well, it's a historical event. So why did the real Henry Ford spend this kind of money to do this? He's not selling race cars. Why did he do it? He did it because he was insulted to that degree. And so now the idea of this enormously rich company pouring endless resources to win this one little thing that is not essential to their business model. We know it's important to car guys, but it's not essential to their business model. It's not going to make much of a difference. Now we understand the whole thing. And now that relationship between Matt Damon and Christian Bale, these people are the champions. They are basically the champions of America, which means that they're actually the champions of the little guy. Bale and Damon together are, because Damon's got a cowboy hat. He's a regular guy. Bale is this working class guy, with all these problems. As E.M. Mann points out, now it's personal. Yes, now I care because now it's not about advertising or anything. Now it's personal. And so now you've got these two flawed regular Joe guys who now represent you as the audience member because you're a regular Joe too. And now, once you're set up like this, now all of a sudden you are in the car because it's a regular guy in the car and you are running this race and the stakes are astronomical. The stakes are not just recognition. The stakes are they have not only insulted my country, they've insulted my identity, they've insulted me. And I am going to, by God, out there and do it. They've insulted my family, as Uptick Rick is on a roll here again. They've insulted this family of ours. See, that's why it works, because Enzo Ferrari didn't have to do that. He could have just said, "Oh, that's very kind, Mr. Ford, but I think we found some alternative financing, and we believe we'll go that route." Well, if he'd said that, then there never would have been a movie, and it never would have happened in real life. But it was the hubris of it, and this is now we get to the foundation, right? The foundation. The whole movie happens. The shot that fires that movie is the fatal, tragic character flaw of Enzo Ferrari. That's what makes the movie happen. It is the character flaw in that man. It's that arrogance and that hubris. That he fires off an insult, carefully crafted insult, to do as much damage as possible out of hubris. His pride is hurt. And the Greeks understood that every time you have hubris is one of the two shows we shot today with Zoe, by the way. Hubris and nemesis go hand in hand. If you start making boastful claims, then nemesis will come and punish you. And that's why the movie happens, is because of the character flaw in Enzo Ferrari. He was too proud to simply, he didn't even have to be nice. He could have just been anything other than studied cruelty, but he wasn't. So, all right, Enzo. So you got your shot off on Mr. Ford, and you definitely hurt his feelings. And then he came back and kicked your ass. And 50, 60 years after it happened, we're going to kick your ass again for being so petty and so small. This is this Greek idea of divine retribution. It's really true if you think about it. The actual Enzo Ferrari constructed a weapon of great cruelty, deployed it for his own personal satisfaction, and now 70 years later or whatever, hundreds of millions of people get to watch him pay for it. Pretty cool. Karma's a bitch. Yes, that's right, Marusha Dark. Karma is a bitch indeed. It's a great movie, and I'm really glad you brought it up, Clay. It's a really great movie, and it's a good example, I think, of why good movies can be good movies. They hit all of the right notes. They fulfill you. That's what a really good movie does. It fulfills you. It doesn't. It's not that it doesn't make you feel. I mean, people say, "Oh, it's a feel-good movie," but that's a little bit thin. That's kind of like that's like a cake icing kind of a sugar high for what it really is. When I say it fulfills you, it reaffirms your faith in the things that you believe in, and that you've been taught to believe in. And one of the things that you've been taught to believe in is that good will triumph over evil, that people with heart will beat the people with the money, or whatever the case may be. All of these values are reinforced by this, and that's why you come out of that feeling so good, because it is visual evidence that the things that you believe in, and not just like, I mean, they're your these core parts of your personality, are real and authentic and correct, and you're correct for believing them. It validates you. I hate that word, but that's what it is. It basically tells you, no, you're on the right team, and that's why. And I think that'll do it. A little under 2 hours, but a lot of fun. I just love these so much. I really do, and looking forward to branching out there. And I will definitely try to reach Nerdrotic and Drinker, because these kind of conversations, I think, are really important, and they're so good at what they do. I listen to everything they do. That's the only thing I ever do. Listen to is I don't watch television. I just, on the way into work and on the way out from work, I put on a Critical Drinker or a Nerdrotic or a Doomcock. And by the way, Another channel, two channels that I like very much. Um, and one of them is really crazy addictive, and that's called Fascinating Horror. I listened to, I binge listened to half of his stuff. I listened to the first one, I binge listened to the rest of it, and now I just, anytime one of them comes out, they're great. Fascinating Horror is a guy who tells, it's a historical thing. It's about, the segment's usually about 10, 12, 14 minutes long. And Fascinating Horror is this very dispassionate kind of voice, well researched, very, very well researched. And he talks about these disasters, mostly disasters that no one really knows about, or at least are not in the public mind, you know. And he just, and the music is just, it's very repetitive music, but it's just, I keep hearing it now. It's like, it is very, very compelling. Um, it's just very good, and I recommend it highly. So it's a Fascinating Horror, and the avatar is like it's like a raven, I think. Very, very good. The other one I like a lot is called Coffee House Crime. Very similar in a lot of ways. It's another British guy who basically goes over true crime cases, and they do it in a very dispassionate way, and it's great. So that's Fascinating Horror, uh, Coffee House Crime, and we. It's been a while since I mentioned Thoughty too, but he's a machine, and that's that. Roy Hamill says YouTube is how I know how to fix my car. I will leave you with this. I was on a road trip someplace, and I was in the middle of nowhere in a rental car, and yeah, Dave Big Booty says the first story is about the Edmund Fitzgerald. I'd start with this earlier stuff, but it's just great. The one on the fire at this Victorian hall that happened in the 1800s is all of them. They're fantastic. Anyway, uh, where was I? Oh, YouTube. So I'm in a rental car and I'm in the middle of nowhere and it's middle of the night and I can I cannot find the fuel cap release on this Toyota or whatever it was. I couldn't find it, and I'm underneath the dashboard with this thing, and I've got my light out, and I mean I'm serious. I'm looking 15, 20 minutes. This is not a terribly tough thing for me to do. I think it was the fuel cap thing. Maybe it was the hood. No, it must have been the fuel cap. I couldn't find it. Could not find it. And then I think, my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to be able to get it again. It's like, wait a minute. Got a cell signal? Yes. And go to YouTube. Refueling 2017 Toyota Camry. And the guy just goes reach over here and pop this thing. It's like, son of a bitch, there it is. Anyway, yeah, all of the knowledge of the world, and if only the people who were the gatekeepers of this would go back to what they originally did and just not try to run our lives, we'd be in grand shape. But it's just too much power. So anyway, actually, the answer to the question to that particular case with the gas cap was I still never found the gas cap release, but I did find the trunk release, and inside the trunk, underneath the bottom, was a crowbar used to change a tire, and that's so I just was able to get it open that way. And it's a rental, and I always get the full coverage, so no big deal. Anyway, that's it, gang. Great fun tonight. Thanks very much for being here. Thanks for the members, as always, who make all this possible. Thanks for your continuing support and your continuing kind words and kind thoughts. And not 100% sure I'll be here next week. I might be out of town with my lovely bride, but we will see. In any event, it's great to be here and great to talk to you. And thanks for the great questions. So we will see you right here next time, right here on the Stratosphere Lounge.